Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a history so boring, so utterly devoid of drama, that it might just be the perfect cure for your insomnia, the ancient, often bizarre, history of how people used to go to sleep. We're talking about the echoes of lost lullabies, the forgotten rituals, and the questionable technology people used to try and get some rest. Imagine you're not in your comfy bed, but instead, you're lying on a stone slab in a temple, surrounded by the faint scent of incense and the low hum of priests chanting. This isn't a thrilling adventure with swords and dragons. This is a journey into the quiet, dark corners of history where nothing much happened, which is exactly the point. The only real danger here is that you might actually fall asleep before I finish. And let me tell you, you probably won't survive this epic tale of headrests and dream interpreters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're up for it, drop your location and the local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who's out there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our first stop is ancient Egypt, a place where sleep wasn't just a physical necessity, it was a spiritual and often a practical affair. You're not just an individual trying to catch some Z's, you're a member of a community. And sometimes, your sleep is a public event. You trudge through the dry, sun-baked landscape, the sandals on your feet kicking up dust, and you find yourself at one of the temples dedicated to a specific deity. For the Egyptians, sleep was a liminal state, a time when the veil between the living and the gods was at its thinnest. This is where the concept of dream incubation comes in. And it's a mainstream historical fact you probably learned in a class you were desperately trying to stay awake in. People would visit these temples, often staying overnight in special dream halls, hoping that a god would visit them in their sleep. They believed the divine could offer healing, prophecy, or guidance through dreams. Think of it as the original psychic hotline, but with way more incense and no-hold music. The sleep setup itself was a choice. You lie down, not on a soft, fluffy pillow, but on what's known as a headrest. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit that's easy to overlook. These headrests were small, often semicircular blocks of wood, stone, or even ivory, elevated on a short stand. They were designed to lift the head and neck off the ground. A design that looks more like an ergonomic nightmare than a tool for restful sleep. The purpose wasn't comfort, but preservation. They wanted to protect the head, the seat of the soul, from the insects and snakes crawling on the floor. It also kept their elaborate hairstyles from being messed up, which, let's be honest, is a very relatable concern. Even today, you can almost feel the crick in your neck just thinking about it. Right? You drift off, your head perched precariously, hoping a god would show up and not a scorpion. The sleep environment itself was often very public. Families would sleep together on mats on the floor, all in the same room. The concept of a private bedroom was a luxury reserved for the truly elite. The air would be filled with the sounds of people breathing, shifting, and the distant calls of animals. This communal slumber was a far cry from the modern ideal of a silent, dark, and private sanctuary. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians saw sleep as a single, consolidated period or if they practiced segmented sleep, waking up for a few hours in the middle of the night before returning to bed. This nocturnal interruption might have been a time for prayer, a brief meal, or a bit of conversation before the second round of sleep. It was a more fluid, less rigid approach to rest than we're accustomed to. You can almost picture them. A family group, stirring in the dark, a hushed murmur of voices, a shared moment of calm before the final stretch of sleep. They lived their lives in a way that blurred the lines between waking and sleeping. And it all started with their specific beliefs about what rest actually was. You're not just sleeping, you're engaging in a sacred, and slightly uncomfortable, ritual. You're waking up now, a little stiff from the wooden headrest, the memory of a strange, symbolic dream still clinging to the edges of your consciousness. The sun is just beginning to cast its golden light across the Nile. As you leave the temple, you feel a sense of purpose, a quiet conviction that a god spoke to you. Your journey continues, and as the millennia slip by like sand through your fingers, you find yourself transported to ancient Greece. You're no longer surrounded by pyramids and pharaohs but by the serene beauty of the Mediterranean. The philosophy of sleep has evolved. but the underlying belief in its spiritual power remains. You're walking toward an Asclepieion, a temple dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine and healing. This is a mainstream historical fact that forms the cornerstone of our understanding of ancient Greek medicine. These were not just hospitals, they were sacred healing sanctuaries where the line between medicine and faith was wonderfully, confusingly blurred. You trudge up the stone steps, your sandals clicking against the worn marble. The air is fresh, carrying the scent of cypress trees and the faint tang of the sea. Inside, you're not given a prescription for a pill, but a ritual. The priests, acting as intermediaries between you and Asclepius, guide you through a series of purifications. You bathe in a sacred spring, fast, and offer sacrifices to the god. This is all in preparation for the core ritual, incubatio, or dream incubation, a practice that we remember from Egypt but with a distinctly Greek twist. You're led to a special building within the complex, known as the abaton, a sacred dormitory where you will sleep. You're lying on a simple bed of reeds, perhaps, or a mat on the floor, surrounded by other pilgrims seeking a cure. You can almost feel the collective hope in the air. The goal isn't just to sleep, it's to dream. The priests encourage you to focus on your ailment, to petition Asclepius for a sign. You fall into a light slumber, and in your dream, Asclepius himself, perhaps in the form of a serpent, his sacred animal, a dog, or a priest, appears to you. He might touch the afflicted part of your body, or he might simply give you a sign or a symbol to be interpreted later. This is the quirky or fringe tidbit that really highlights the unique nature of their medicine. The dream wasn't just a side effect, it was the entire point of the treatment. The healing was believed to happen in the dream state, either directly by the god's touch or through the guidance he provided. Waking up, you don't immediately know what it all means. You're not expected to. You would then go to a priest, a dream interpreter, who would help you decode the symbolism of your dream. A serpent might not be a scary snake, but a representation of Asclepius. A specific image could be a command to visit a certain spring, to eat a particular food, or to engage in a specific ritual. The priests were as much psychologists as they were healers, and their work involved piecing together the subconscious anxieties and hopes of the supplicants. Historians still argue whether the physical healing that occurred in these temples was due to the psychosomatic effect of belief, the cleanliness and rituals, or if the priests were simply acting as doctors with a bit of spiritual theater on the side. The combination of faith, ritual, and a structured period of rest was a powerful concoction, one that often led to perceived cures. You've experienced not just a night of sleep, but a night of healing, a quiet, profound encounter with the divine. It's a sleep you're unlikely to ever forget. The echoes of the temple priests fade as you leave the sanctuary, a sense of quiet hope now residing where your ailment once was. The millennia continue their slow march, and you find yourself in the bustling, powerful heart of ancient Rome. The Greeks sought healing in sleep, but the Romans, ever practical, began a slow but significant shift in its purpose. You're walking down a narrow, cobbled street, the scent of baking bread and the murmur of Latin filling the air. You pass grand public baths and bustling marketplaces, but your destination is a quieter, more private space, the Roman bedchamber. This is a mainstream historical fact, the slow evolution of sleep from a public, communal affair into a more private, domestic ritual. The Roman home, or domus, was a microcosm of their social order, and the bedchamber, the cubiculum, was a powerful symbol of status and privacy. You step inside the home of a wealthy Roman, and the change is immediate. The space is separated, walled off. The family doesn't all sleep in one big room anymore. The master and mistress of the house have their own dedicated room. The bed itself is a far cry from the Greek reed mat or the Egyptian headrest. It's an elaborate, often ornate piece of furniture, a wooden frame with a mattress stuffed with wool, straw, or even feathers for the truly wealthy. The bed, or lectus, was a symbol of both rest and social standing. The poorer classes still slept on simple mats on the floor, but the trend toward private, comfortable sleep was in motion. This is the quirky or fringe tidbit that highlights the growing importance of personal space. The cubiculum was not just for sleeping, either. It was also a place for business meetings and quiet reflection, a space where the master of the house could receive important visitors in a more intimate setting. You can almost feel the social weight of the space. Despite this move toward privacy, the Romans still held a deep fascination with dreams. They weren't just random neurological firing, they were seen as messages from the gods. Prophecies, or omens, dream interpreters, or sortilegi, were a common fixture in Roman society. Consulted by both emperors and common citizens, they would pore over dream symbols, decoding messages and offering advice. A dream of an eagle, for example, might be a good omen of a future victory, while a dream of a black bird might signal impending doom. The historian Suetonius even tells a tale about Julius Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, who dreamed of her husband's murder the night before his assassination, and urged him not to go to the Senate that day. He ignored her, and well, you know how that went. It's a tale that underscores the cultural belief that dreams were a window into the future, and ignoring them could be a fatal mistake. The Romans' approach to dreams wasn't purely spiritual, though. They also had more secular, psychological interpretations. Cicero, for instance, argued that dreams were often a reflection of our waking anxieties and thoughts. Historians still argue whether the Romans' fascination with dreams was a genuine spiritual belief or simply a tool for political manipulation and social control. A powerful leader who could claim divine guidance through dreams would have a significant advantage over their rivals. You can almost hear the hushed conversations in the cubiculum, the plotting and scheming that went on in the dead of night. Your journey is taking you from the communal and sacred to the personal and political. A quiet revolution happening one bed at a time. Leaving the private cubiculum of Rome, you travel further back in time. The great empire crumbling behind you as you arrive in the cradle of civilization itself, ancient Mesopotamia. The air here is heavy with the scent of clay and the dust of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is not a world of grand marble and private bedchambers, but of sun-baked brick and communal courtyards. And here, sleep isn't just about rest or even healing, it's a sacred, often terrifying, source of information. This is a mainstream historical fact. The deep-seated Mesopotamian belief that dreams were a primary means of communication with the gods and a tool for divination. You're no longer just a person seeking rest, you're a potential recipient of divine prophecy. You trudge through a crowded city like Ur or Babylon, past bustling markets and ziggurats towering toward the sky. As night falls, you find yourself in a simple home, lying on a mat on the floor, surrounded by your family. There's no private bedroom here, sleep is a shared experience. The air is still and heavy. And as you drift off, you're not just hoping for a good night's rest. You're hoping for a dream that is clear and decipherable. In Mesopotamia, not all dreams were created equal. Some were from the gods, while others were believed to be sent by demons or evil spirits, designed to mislead and harm. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit that really sets their dream culture apart. They didn't just interpret dreams, they had to determine their very origin first. Was this a divine message or a demonic trick? It was a high-stakes guessing game. To help in this endeavor, they developed a complex system of dream interpretation, or omen. If you had a particularly vivid or unsettling dream, you wouldn't keep it to yourself. You would seek out a professional dream interpreter, a scholar, or a priest who was trained in the art of decoding these nocturnal messages. The dream interpreter would consult a massive collection of texts, cuneiform tablets filled with lists of dream symbols and their corresponding meanings. If you dreamed of an ass eating barley, for example, that might be a good omen. If you dreamed of an ass braying, that might be a very bad one. This system was so vital to their culture that these dream books were some of the most important texts in their libraries. You can almost feel the anxiety of waiting for a professional to tell you whether your subconscious was delivering good news or a death sentence. The practice of dream divination wasn't just for the common folk, either. Kings and emperors would consult these interpreters before making major decisions. From waging war to building temples. The great king Gilgamesh, a figure from one of the world's oldest surviving epic poems, is said to have interpreted his dreams to understand his fate and his journey. Historians still argue whether the Mesopotamian focus on dreams was a form of spiritual piety or a way for the ruling class to maintain power and control by claiming divine endorsement for their actions. It was a potent combination of belief and pragmatism. As you lie there, drifting off to sleep, you're not just closing your eyes, you're opening a portal to a world of omens. prophecies, and a very serious need for a good interpreter. You're waking up from a dream of a braying ass, relieved to find it was just the wind whistling through the cracks in the mud brick wall. As you leave the dusty streets of Mesopotamia behind, the world shifts once more. The air grows cooler and the landscape greener. You're now in ancient China, a land of flowing rivers and towering mountains. The approach to sleep here is not about prophecy or healing in the Western sense, but something far more internal and philosophical. This is a mainstream historical fact: the deep-seated connection between sleep and the spiritual journey in Taoist philosophy. For the Taoists, sleep wasn't just a time for the body to rest, it was an opportunity for the spirit to wander, to cultivate energy, and to achieve a deeper harmony with the natural world. You trudge along a quiet path, past a tranquil monastery where robed figures move with a serene purpose. Your destination is not a temple for healing, but a simple sleeping mat in a quiet, cool room. There's no ornate furniture here, no elaborate pillows. The focus is on simplicity and alignment with nature. You lie down, not just to close your eyes, but to begin an internal journey. The Taoist philosophy of sleep is all about the cultivation of qi, or life force. They believe that during the day, your qi is active and flowing outward, but at night, it retracts inward, gathering and replenishing the body. To sleep well was to ensure this vital process was not interrupted. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in, the practice of inner alchemy. Taoists believed that through specific sleeping postures and breathing techniques, you could guide your qi to circulate and strengthen, transforming your body and spirit. They would lie on their side, a position they believed was best for the heart, with one hand tucked under the cheek and the other resting on the stomach. The goal was to calm the mind and nourish the spirit. They believed that if you could achieve a state of deep, quiet rest, your spirit could leave your body and wander the cosmos, interacting with immortals and gaining wisdom. This wasn't about a god visiting you in a dream, it was about your own spirit taking a cosmic road trip. It was a journey of self-improvement, a quiet quest to become one with the Tao, the fundamental, unnameable force of the universe. The Taoist approach also emphasized the harmony of yin and yang, the complementary forces that govern all things. Sleep was the ultimate yin state, a time of darkness, quiet, and receptivity, while wakefulness was the yang state of light, activity, and external engagement. To be healthy and balanced, you needed to respect both. This is a far cry from our modern, hustle culture, where sleep is often seen as a necessary evil to be minimized. To a Taoist, a lack of sleep was not a sign of dedication, it was a sign of a life out of balance. Historians still argue whether these practices were primarily for spiritual cultivation or if they had a more practical, medicinal purpose, serving as an early form of mind-body therapy. Regardless, their approach to sleep was a seamless blend of the physical and the metaphysical. As you lie there, you're not just a person trying to get some rest, you're a quiet, sleeping universe, and your spirit is just beginning to wander. Your spirit returns from its cosmic journey, settling back into your body as the world shifts yet again. The tranquil monasteries and philosophical musings of China give way to the smoky, crowded halls of medieval Europe. The quiet solitude of Taoist sleep is a distant memory. You're now a member of a peasant family in a small village, and your bedtime routine is a world away from anything we've experienced so far. This is a mainstream historical fact that completely upends our modern notions of privacy. Communal sleeping was the norm for the vast majority of people during the Middle Ages. You didn't have your own room, your own bed, or even your own quiet corner. You slept with everyone else. You trudge through the mud-caked streets of a small village, the scent of wood smoke and damp earth in the air. The sun has set, and the only light comes from a single hearth fire inside your small, one-room cottage. The concept of a separate bedroom is non-existent. You, your parents, your siblings, and maybe even a few livestock huddled together on a large, shared straw mattress on the floor. It's a bit of a sensory overload, the warmth of bodies, the soft rustling of straw, and the occasional snort from a pig in the corner. There's no escaping the sounds and smells of your family. You're a human heating pad, and everyone else is, too. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in, the practice of segmented sleep, or what historians call the first sleep and the second sleep. Remember the Egyptians and their potential for interrupted rest? Well, the medieval Europeans definitely had this down to an art form. People would go to bed shortly after dusk, around 9 p.m. or so, and sleep for a few hours. Then, in the middle of the night, they would wake up for an hour or two. This was a time for prayer, for a quiet meal, for conversation, or even to visit a neighbor. It was a time of quiet productivity, a period of calm reflection in the darkest hours of the night. After this brief period of wakefulness, they would return to bed for their second sleep, waking up again at dawn. Historians still argue whether this was a natural, biological rhythm or a social and cultural habit influenced by the lack of artificial light. The absence of electricity meant that night was truly dark and quiet. And it made sense to use those waking hours in the middle of the night for tasks that didn't require light. The spiritual significance of sleep also remains strong, especially within the confines of the church and monastery. Monks, for example, would wake up in the middle of the night for their designated prayers. Known as the night vigil or matins, sleep was a spiritual battleground, a time to be vigilant against temptation and to connect with God. For the common person, a quiet prayer before bed was a way to seek protection from the dangers of the night. From literal bandits to spiritual demons, your sleep was a mix of practical necessity and quiet devotion. As you lie there, a bit too close for comfort to your family, you realize that for these people, sleep was not an individual act, but a communal, shared experience, a quiet rhythm that everyone followed together in the dark. You stir in the straw, a sense of shared humanity lingering in the cold, pre-dawn air. But as the sun rises, the crowded, communal warmth of the medieval cottage is swept away by a cold, bracing wind. The world shifts again, and you find yourself on the rough, unforgiving deck of a Viking longship. The rhythmic creak of the oars and the salty spray of the sea are the new soundtrack to your existence. This is a mainstream historical fact that completely challenges our modern, domesticated view of rest. For the Vikings, sleep was a strategic, and often uncomfortable, necessity, a brief respite between raids and long journeys. The idea of a private bedchamber is not just a luxury, it's a fantasy. You're not sleeping in a bed, you're sleeping on a narrow plank, tucked in with your fellow warriors. There's no room for personal space, and the sounds of your shipmates snoring and the groans of the timber are a constant presence. The air is cold and damp, and you're relying on your animal skin cloak for warmth. This is the definition of a hard life, and it's a far cry from the soft, fluffy pillows we take for granted. This reality check is the quirky or fringe tidbit of this section. The Vikings' relationship with sleep was entirely dictated by their lifestyle. On a longship, every square inch of space was a commodity, and rest was a communal, no-frills affair. You weren't just a crew member, you were a puzzle piece, fitting in wherever you could find a spot. But despite the harsh conditions, the Vikings held a deep and spiritual reverence for dreams. They believed that dreams, like those of the Mesopotamians, could be prophetic. Their sagas, the epic tales of their heroes, are filled with accounts of prophetic dreams that foretold battles, betrayals, and even deaths. These dreams were not just random nighttime stories, they were seen as glimpses into the future. Messages from the gods, or warnings from the Norns, the Norse goddesses of fate. A dream of a wolf might foretell an attack, while a dream of a raven might signal the presence of the god Odin. These dreams were taken seriously and often discussed and interpreted by the jarl, or chieftain, and his council. You can almost feel the hushed, serious tones as a warrior recounts a dream to his leader, everyone listening intently for a sign of what's to come. Historians still argue whether the Viking sagas, with their tales of prophetic dreams, were a reflection of genuine spiritual belief or a literary device used to add drama and meaning to their stories. It's easy to see how a dream could be used to justify a raid or a decision, giving it a sense of divine purpose. The harsh reality of Viking life, combined with a rich and complex spiritual belief system, created a unique relationship with sleep. It was a time of physical rest, yes, but it was also a time of spiritual vulnerability. A moment when the veil between the world of the living and the world of the gods was at its thinnest. As you lie there, a bit too cold and a bit too close to the person next to you, you realize that for the Vikings, a dream was just as much a part of their survival strategy as their longship and their axe. The salty spray of the sea and the cold breath of the north give way to the vast, Open landscapes of the Americas. You've crossed an ocean and traveled through time, leaving the communal beds of Europe and the longships of the Vikings behind. Now, you're in a world where sleep is not just a time of rest, but a deliberate and spiritual quest. This is a mainstream historical fact. The widespread use of dreams for vision quests and spiritual guidance among various indigenous American tribes. The purpose of sleep here is not just to rejuvenate the body, it's to connect with the ancestors, the spirit world, and the very fabric of existence. You trudge through a quiet, sun-dappled forest. The sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves your only companions. You're not in a village or a town, but on a secluded patch of land, a sacred spot chosen for its solitude and spiritual energy. You've prepared for this moment for days, perhaps even weeks, through fasting, purification rituals, and intense prayer. The goal is a vision quest, a journey into the self and the spirit world, and sleep is the main vehicle for the trip. You lie down on the bare earth, a thin blanket of hide your only protection against the cool night air. The stars begin to emerge, and the silence is absolute, save for the distant call of a wolf. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in, the use of specific plant medicines and rituals to induce or clarify dreams. Many tribes, from the Ojibwe to the Lakota, used plants like mugwort or the bark of the willow tree, brewed into a tea or burned as incense, to help guide them on their dream journey. They believed these plants had a spiritual essence that could open the doors of perception and make the messages from the spirit world clearer. A dream catcher, a beautiful and intricate web of sinew and beads, would often be hung above a person's resting place to filter out the bad dreams and let the good ones through. The dreams were seen as a dialogue, a conversation between you and the universe. The purpose of these dreams wasn't just to see the future, it was to receive a vision, a mission, or a name. You might be visited by a spirit guide in the form of an animal, a bear, an eagle, or a wolf. That would become your lifelong protector and teacher. You might receive a song, a dance, or a sacred story that would guide your path in life. The vision quest was a rite of passage, a turning point in your life that would shape your identity and your purpose. Historians still argue whether the dream quests were a form of psychological self-exploration or a genuine spiritual connection to a higher power. It's a question that gets to the heart of how we define consciousness and reality. As you lie there, feeling the cool earth beneath your back, you're not just waiting for sleep, you're waiting for a sign. A message, a quiet instruction that will change your life forever. The vision quest ends as the morning light breaks, and you carry its weight and meaning with you. The vast American landscapes recede, and a new world takes shape, one of delicate artistry, serene gardens, and a deep appreciation for the ephemeral. You've arrived in Heian, Japan, a time of courtly elegance and quiet refinement. The focus of sleep here is not about prophecy or spiritual quests in the same dramatic sense, but something far more subtle. It's a part of a larger aesthetic and intellectual lifestyle. This is a mainstream historical fact. The rise of a unique culture around sleep and rest, particularly among the court nobility. You're walking through a grand palace, your feet sliding on polished wooden floors. The air is cool, and the scent of plum blossoms drifts in from a nearby garden. This is a world of ritual and beauty, and even sleep is an art form. You're not sleeping on a straw mat or a hard plank, you're resting on a soft futon on the floor, surrounded by sliding paper screens, shoji, that create a private, quiet space. The concept of personal space is now a part of the cultural fabric, and it's a testament to the sophistication of the era. The very act of folding up the futon in the morning and putting it away created a seamless transition from a sleeping space to a living space, blurring the lines between rest and daily life. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in, and it's one of the most charming pieces of history we've encountered so far: the pillow books. These weren't books you read to fall asleep, but rather, journals and notebooks kept by noblewomen who used their pillows as a sort of makeshift desk or storage space. The most famous example, the Pillow Book by Say Shonigan, is a collection of observations, lists, poems, and musings on court life, often written in the quiet hours before or after sleep. They were a testament to the intellectual and emotional lives of these women, a place for their private thoughts to flourish. The pillow wasn't just a place for your head, it was a repository of your dreams. both literal and figurative. The culture of rest in Heian Japan also embraced the idea of napping as a form of intellectual and artistic reflection. A midday nap wasn't a sign of laziness, it was a way to recharge your mind and spirit. A moment to step away from the rigors of court life and allow your creative energies to flow. A poet might take a nap to find inspiration for a new verse. Or a calligrapher might rest to clear their mind before a difficult piece. Historians still argue whether the quiet, introspective nature of Japanese sleep culture was a product of their unique religious beliefs, like Zen Buddhism, or if it was simply a byproduct of an aristocratic society that had the luxury of time. Regardless, the result was a world where sleep was not just a biological need but a part of a larger, beautiful tapestry of life. As you lie there on your soft futon, listening to the gentle hum of the world outside, you realize that for these people, even your rest was a masterpiece. The quiet hum of the Heian Palace and the intellectual repose of the pillow book fade. And a new sound fills the air, the call to prayer. The beautiful and resonant dawn. You've traveled across the world and centuries again, arriving in the vibrant, spiritual landscape of the Islamic world. The approach to sleep here is not about spiritual quests or artistic reflection, but about ritual, cleanliness, and a deep sense of a personal relationship with God. This is a mainstream historical fact. The prescribed rituals and etiquette of sleep in Islamic tradition, a system that transforms a simple biological need into a spiritual act. You trudge through a bustling market, the air thick with the scent of spices and the murmur of conversation. As the sun begins to set, you make your way home. Your evening routine is not just about getting ready for bed, it's a series of actions with spiritual significance. You perform wudu, a ritual washing of the hands, face, and feet, ensuring that you are clean before you sleep. This act of purification is a quirky or fringe tidbit that highlights the profound connection between the physical and the spiritual. It's not just about hygiene, it's about presenting your best self to God. Even in your unconscious state, once you are clean, you enter your bedchamber. The bed is simple and clean, and you lie down, not on your back or stomach, but on your right side. This is a specific instruction from the Prophet Muhammad, and it's believed to be the most comfortable and beneficial position for the body. You recite specific prayers and supplications before you fall asleep, seeking protection from evil and asking for a peaceful night. You might also read a few verses from the Quran. This isn't a quick, mumbled prayer, it's a quiet, reflective moment, a final act of devotion before you drift off. Dreams in Islamic tradition are also held in high regard. They are believed to be one of three types: a message from God, a suggestion from the self, or a trick from Satan. Telling a good dream to someone you trust is encouraged, while a bad dream is to be dismissed and not shared. You're instructed to turn to your other side if you have a bad dream and to seek refuge in God from its evil. It's a very practical and direct way of dealing with the anxieties that can plague us in our sleep. Historians still argue whether the prescribed sleep rituals in Islam were a product of religious decree or a brilliant way of codifying good hygiene and health practices into a spiritual framework. The result, regardless of the origin, is a bedtime routine that is both practical and deeply meaningful. As you lie on your right side, the quiet hum of your own prayers your final thought, you realize that for this culture, even your sleep is a form of worship. The quiet prayers of the Islamic world fade, and you are transported into a world of whispered secrets and opulent luxury. You've arrived at the heart of the Ottoman Empire, specifically within the sacred and secluded walls of the harem. The approach to sleep here is not about communal piety or individual spiritual quests. It is a blend of comfort, ritual, and a strategic understanding of power. This is a mainstream historical fact that completely challenges our modern assumptions about sleep. Within the harem, rest was a highly curated and controlled experience, meticulously designed to serve the political and social dynamics of the palace. You are walking, not through dusty streets, but along a cool, tiled corridor, the scent of rosewater and exotic spices in the air. The sounds of the outside world are muted, replaced by the soft rustle of silk and the gentle murmur of women's voices. You enter a chamber, and the luxury is immediate and overwhelming. The bed is not a simple mat or a wooden frame, it is an elaborate, cushioned affair, piled high with silk pillows and soft, embroidered blankets. The lighting is low, Perhaps from an oil lamp that casts a warm, golden glow on the walls. The air is still and serene. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in, and it's a fascinating look into the social hierarchy of the harem. The sleep arrangements were not random, they were a clear reflection of a woman's status and power. The sultan's mother, the Valide Sultan, would have the most luxurious and private chambers. The sultan's wives and favorites would also have their own private rooms, while the lesser-ranked concubines and servants would sleep in communal dormitories on simpler bedding. The placement of a woman's bed, the quality of her linens, and the size of her room were all silent indicators of her standing. You can almost feel the weight of this social hierarchy, even in the quiet moments before sleep. The rituals of bedtime were also important. The women would often engage in elaborate grooming rituals, using fragrant oils and powders to prepare for the night. They might be entertained with music or storytelling before bed, a final act of indulgence before they drifted off. Dreams were taken seriously, much like in other ancient cultures, and dream interpreters were often consulted to decode messages and prophecies. A woman who had a prophetic dream might be seen as having a closer connection to the divine, elevating her status within the harem. Historians still argue whether the extreme luxury and comfort of the Ottoman harem were a form of genuine care for the women or a clever way to control them by keeping them isolated and dependent on the palace. Regardless, the result was a bedtime routine that was not just about getting rest but about navigating a complex web of power, politics, and social status. You slip out of the perfumed corridors of the Ottoman harem, leaving behind the whispers of power and the rustle of silk. The world shifts again, the air growing dry and a little spicy with the scent of desert winds. You've arrived in ancient Persia, a land of vast empires and rich intellectual traditions. The approach to sleep here is not just about personal rest or political intrigue. It's a blend of spiritual belief and a very early form of medical science. This is a mainstream historical fact. The deep-seated Persian belief that dreams were a source of medical diagnosis and prophecy, often interpreted by specialized professionals. You are walking through a city like Persepolis or Ctesiphon, the grand architecture a testament to a powerful civilization. As night falls, you find yourself in a comfortable home, a bed with a simple mattress on the floor, and the air is filled with the scent of herbs and spices. The Persians, like many cultures before them, believed that dreams were messages from the divine, but they took it a step further. They believed that a dream could be a window into the health of your body. A dream about a flooded house, for example, might be seen as a sign of an imbalance of humors, an excess of phlegm or blood that needed to be addressed. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit that shows a fascinating intersection of spirituality and medicine. The interpreters of these dreams were often not just priests but also physicians. The physician would ask you about your dreams as part of his diagnosis, using the symbols and emotions in your dreams to help him understand what was ailing you. They believed that the body and mind were inextricably linked, and that the subconscious could reveal truths that the conscious mind was unaware of. The famous Persian physician and philosopher, Avicenna, wrote extensively on the connection between dreams and health, arguing that dreams could predict the onset of a disease before any physical symptoms appeared. This was a truly holistic approach to health, one that saw the body, mind, and spirit as a single, interconnected system. The prophetic aspect of dreams was also a serious part of Persian culture. Kings would have official dream interpreters on their payroll, men who could decode a dream about a falling star or a roaring lion and turn it into a warning or a sign of good fortune. The famous King Cyrus the Great is said to have had a dream that foretold his rise to power, a story that became a cornerstone of his legend. Historians still argue whether this practice was a form of genuine spiritual belief, a clever way to manipulate public opinion, or simply a byproduct of an advanced, intellectual culture that was trying to make sense of the world. As you lie there, drifting off to sleep, you're not just closing your eyes, you're opening a portal to a world of symbols and prophecies. A world where a dream could be a life-saving diagnosis. The medical prophecies and philosophical musings of Persia fade, and the world begins to feel different. The air is no longer dusty and ancient, but crisp and full of a new kind of energy. You've arrived in the Age of Enlightenment, a time of reason, science, and a fundamental shift in how people understood everything, including sleep. This is a mainstream historical fact that marks a huge turning point in our story. The shift from sleep as a spiritual state to a biological necessity. The gods, the prophecies, and the rituals are beginning to take a backseat to a new, more scientific understanding. You're walking down a cobbled street in a city like London or Paris. The gas lamps are just beginning to be installed, casting a faint, flickering light on the newly constructed brick buildings. The world is buzzing with new ideas, Newton's laws of motion, Voltaire's ideas on liberty, and a general feeling that humanity is finally beginning to understand the universe through reason and logic. Sleep, once a mysterious portal to the divine, is now being studied and analyzed. Scientists and philosophers are beginning to write about it not as a spiritual journey, but as a period of physical restoration for the body and mind. It's a pragmatic, almost clinical approach. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in. As the understanding of sleep changed, so did the design of the bed and the bedroom. The concept of a private bedchamber for the wealthy, which we first saw in Rome, now became a standard for the middle and upper classes. Beds became more ornate, with canopies and curtains designed to keep out drafts and create a private, womb-like sanctuary. The bed itself, once a simple wooden frame, became a status symbol, a piece of furniture that reflected the owner's wealth and good taste. The bedroom was no longer just for sleeping, it was a space for quiet contemplation, reading, and sometimes, even entertaining close friends. The spiritual aspect of sleep didn't vanish entirely, of course. Many people still said their prayers before bed, but the focus had shifted. Historians still argue whether this rationalization of sleep was a sign of intellectual progress or a loss of a deeper, more spiritual connection to the natural rhythms of life. The segmented sleep of the Middle Ages, with its two distinct periods of rest and wakefulness, began to disappear. People, influenced by new ideas about efficiency and productivity, started to believe that a single, consolidated block of sleep was the best way to rest. As you lie in your newfound private bedchamber, the soft glow of a candle your only light, you realize that you're experiencing not just a new era, but a new way of being, where your rest is no longer about the gods, but about you. The private, candlelit bedchamber of the Enlightenment fades into a new kind of darkness. The year is no longer a gentle waltz of reason, but a frantic, mechanical march. You've arrived at the Industrial Revolution, and the world is being remade in the image of the factory. The rationalization of sleep from the previous era now takes on a new, much harsher form. This is a mainstream historical fact that fundamentally changed how we live. The disruption of natural sleep patterns by artificial light and the demands of factory work. The quiet, gentle rhythm of the day is now being replaced by a relentless, man-made one. You are walking through a city like Manchester or Birmingham, and the air is thick with the soot of coal-fired factories. The streets are no longer lit by soft, flickering gas lamps, but by the harsh, glaring light of new electric arc lamps. The night, once a time of quiet darkness and rest, is now a time of labor. People, both men and women, are working in shifts, their lives dictated not by the sun, but by the clock on the factory wall. The concept of working the night shift is born, and it completely upends the traditional sleep schedule. You no longer sleep when the sun goes down, you sleep when your shift ends, which might be in the middle of the day. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in, and it's a testament to the sheer weirdness of this new era. With the advent of new technology and the demand for constant productivity, the lines between work and rest began to blur in a way we've never seen before. People would try to sleep in crowded, noisy tenements, the sounds of the factory whistles and the trains a constant presence. The communal sleeping we saw in the Middle Ages was no longer about community, it was about poverty. Large families would cram into a single room, sharing beds or even sleeping on the floor. The concept of a private bedchamber, a distant, unattainable dream. The lack of proper rest led to a host of health problems, a fact that was largely ignored in the mad dash for progress. You can almost feel the exhaustion in the air, the collective weariness of a population being worked to the bone. Historians still argue whether the Industrial Revolution's sleep disruption was a necessary evil for progress or a profound cultural and biological tragedy. The lack of sleep was seen by some as a sign of dedication and hard work, a moral virtue. It was a complete reversal of the Taoist view of sleep as a necessary state of balance. The body, once a temple to be cared for, was now a machine to be pushed to its limits. The night, once a spiritual and quiet time, was now a resource to be exploited. As you trudge through the dark, soot-covered streets, the sound of the factory whistle your only companion, you realize that for these people, a good night's sleep was not a given. It was a luxury they could no longer afford. The clatter and soot of the Industrial Revolution fade, replaced by the gaslit, polished, and often stifling elegance of the Victorian era. The apathetic exhaustion of the factory worker gives way to the meticulous and often superstitious bedtime routines of the middle and upper classes. This is a mainstream historical fact: the rise of elaborate Victorian sleep rituals and a renewed fascination with the supernatural. A curious blend of scientific progress and old-world fear. You are walking through a quiet, gaslit street in London, the fog rolling in from the Thames. You enter a grand Victorian home, and the world inside is one of order and tradition. The bedchamber is a sanctuary, a heavily curtained and often over-furnished room with a massive, four-poster bed. The bed itself is a statement, a symbol of wealth and social standing, a place where you are not just sleeping, but performing a ritual. This is where the quirky or fringe tidbit comes in, and it's a bit of a laugh. The Victorians had a specific and often ridiculously restrictive set of rules for nighttime attire. Women wore long, elaborate nightgowns with high necklines and long sleeves, often with a matching nightcap to keep their hair in place and protect them from drafts. Men wore long, buttoned nightshirts. The idea of sleeping naked was simply scandalous, a complete affront to their sense of decorum and modesty. It was a world where even in your most private moments, you were still dressed for company. Despite their scientific and industrial progress, the Victorians were deeply superstitious, especially when it came to sleep. The night was a time of vulnerability, a period when the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest. People were terrified of dying in their sleep, believing that a sudden death could be a sign of a bad soul. To combat this, they had a host of superstitions. They would keep a small lamp or a candle burning all night to ward off evil spirits. And many believed that leaving a mirror uncovered could trap a soul. This fear of the supernatural, of ghosts and spirits, was a constant undercurrent in their culture. It was a strange juxtaposition. A society that was building railroads and developing new medicines was also terrified of what might be lurking in the dark corners of their bedrooms. Historians still argue whether the Victorians' obsession with ritual and superstition was a genuine spiritual fear or a psychological response to the rapid, disorienting changes brought about by the Industrial Revolution. Perhaps they needed a sense of order and control in a world that was becoming increasingly chaotic and unpredictable. The bedtime routine, with its specific clothes, prayers, and superstitions, was a way to impose a sense of calm on a very turbulent world. As you lie in your magnificent, but slightly overbearing, four-poster bed, the gaslight casting long, dancing shadows on the walls, you realize that for the Victorians, sleep wasn't just a physical necessity, it was a psychological battlefield. A nightly ritual of protection against a world they were both fascinated by and utterly terrified of. The final gaslight sputters and goes out, and with it, the last vestiges of our journey fade into the darkness. The grand four-poster bed, the grimy factory floor, the Viking longship, they all dissolve into the soft, quiet space of your own room. The world of boring history has done its job, and the echoes of those lost lullabies have grown faint. It's time now to leave the ancient rituals and the modern anxieties behind. To let the stories of others give way to the peace of your own rest. The quiet hum of your fan, the soft feel of your pillow, these are your headrests, your abaton, your futon, and your sanctuary all in one. There are no more journeys to be taken tonight. No more histories to be explored. Just this moment, this stillness, this gentle descent into the quiet comfort of your own sleep. It's time to let go of the day. To let the thoughts drift away like clouds. The words have run out, and the journey is at an end. All that's left is the sweet, sweet darkness.